Thinkst Canary makes high-fidelity honeypots that set up in minutes and requires no ongoing administration. Attackers moving silently on your network advertise their presence by tripping over them. There's a good reason Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved by some of the best security teams in the world. They're inexpensive, they're simple, and they work. For more information, go to securityweekly.com/canary or direct message @ThinkstCanary on Twitter. In 2018, ransomware advanced significantly and is now capable of taking out infrastructure and operations across the globe. As a result, many organizations are bogged down in reactive work and often overlook the value of crucial information. In Domain Tools Threat Intelligence Report, learn how to uncover some of the most critical insights from your organization's alerts and indicators that will allow you to shift to a more proactive posture. To download this white paper, please visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Is your IT team ready to face the next implementation or upgrade? Do you have a pool of talented team members who are trained and ready to support your organization's growth? The right IT skills development platform can get you past the IT skills gap. With training content that's so engaging, some even call it binge-worthy learning, your team will watch and learn more with IT Pro TV. Get a free team trial of IT Pro TV today. Visit securityweekly.com/IT Pro TV. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Some of you have told us that you're overwhelmed by the amount of content we distribute. In an attempt to address that, we've got a mailing list that you can subscribe to, and that will turn into basically a notification system so that if you tell us you're interested in a list of things, when we publish something that is one of those things, we'll send you a notification. Go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. Click the Join the Listener Interest mailing list button, and you'll be on your way. Also on that page, you can subscribe to all of our shows. Believe it or not, there's 7 on the network.
It's amazing.
Today. Secure Digital Life seems to be the one that needs a little bit of love. If you know people that are just getting into the field, that is the show to send to them. Doug and Russ do a fantastic job covering the basics of security on that show, and it's wildly entertaining.
Especially with the doctor.
The Dr. Doug is a wildly entertaining individual.
Yes, he makes it very. This last week's was all about how to buy heroin on the darknet.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It really was.
And really clearly he might have had some before the show. Ask him how he knows this. I mean,
why is it?
I think he did attempt it. I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure he did.
He's trying to figure it out.
Why is it that it's 2019 and we're still talking about Telnet? Like, seriously? And this
you were
one,
about to say SQL injection.
well, I don't have any stories about that, Joff, but I can say that when we're talking about Telnet, this is in light of Fujifilm X-ray devices. The snippet that I took out is it's even worse than just Telnet. Like, never mind unencrypted access to systems where your credentials and all your data are in clear text, obviously. But this flaw was related to the lack of authentication for Telnet services, CVE 2019-10950. It says the second bug can be exploited to access the underlying operating system and possibly gain complete control of a vulnerable device.
Wow.
You know, the sad part is, Paul, you say that we're still talking about Telnet, and when I teach the wireless course for SANS, there's some opportunities when I say, so when we connect to our switch and we look at these configuration elements, I used to say when we Telnet to our switches and we get Snickers. And now I say, when we SSH to our switch, I still get Snickers, but in the reverse, because people are still telnetting to them. Like,
Yes.
Can't fucking win.
In the case with switches, the ironic thing is that sometimes it's somewhere in between, Larry. It's SSH, but it's like a really, really weak cipher.
Yes.
Like where some of my switches I have to dumb down and like make a configuration file to like really scale back the level of encryption that SSH can do to get into them. Older switches were like SSH v1 that had known vulnerabilities. So yeah.
Even better. Did you know you can do encrypted telnet?
Interesting. On switches?
Well, I don't know about on switches, but encrypted telnet is a thing.
It is a thing. I remember that.
Yep,
yeah.
It is a thing.
Yeah, it was a. Hey, does anybody remember? This kind of takes me back to nostalgic days. Does anybody remember the very first time they actually ran a sniffer we're talking probably 90s somewhere, and they watched Telnet in motion, like,
Oh, yeah.
and it's like,
Oh yeah.
We all talk about it like it's like, oh, yeah, stupid idea, blah, blah, blah. But, that first time that you're like, holy shit, that's the password right there.
It's awesome.
Like, it's that a really awesome experience.
Mine was
then you have you had a snort rule that would just automatically pick up on it and log the credentials. And then there was that one time where I was sniffing Telnet, and I'm like, it looks encrypted, but like not really encrypted. And I'm like, Googling, and it was exactly, Joff. It was Epsidic. It was Epsidic. It was a mainframe.
Yeah, I had something similar, but it wasn't Epsidic, and it looked kind of weird, and it was TN3270 terminal session.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, takes you back.
Yeah, but you can still get that experience today, folks, because there it is.
Yeah. Yes. Now, the example I have is a similar vulnerability is an HDMI router, right? And like, okay, I mean, even in any organization that has an HDMI router, you're only getting so far if you pwn an HDMI router. Like, it's basically like 8 in, 8 outs, and you can map it between them, right?
Yeah, but this is an X-ray device.
Yeah. Now, this example, that's exactly where I was going, Matt. It's an X-ray device. And last week or the week before, we covered a story where they could modify the image. I think it was last week. Modify the diagnostic images in the healthcare environment, and
you apply the two of these together, and you could.
We used to find those things all the time. That's probably still around today. When I was on the university world again, going way back, scanning electron microscopes had embedded Windows NT kernels in them that were never patched.
Well, in the funny, it's not funny. I guess it's kind of sad. With the HDMI switcher I was talking about, there's no way to set a password on the Telnet server. Like, you can't.
Just can't do it.
Physically set a password.
What IP address is this in studio?
I'll tell you after.
No, I'm kidding.
So, like, my solution for that was, well, just plug into the Ethernet of the HDMI switch, plug the other end into a Raspberry Pi, and then enable SSH on the Raspberry Pi, and that's my interface into the switch.
You SSH to the Raspberry Pi and then Telnet into directly into it.
Yeah. That was my solution.
It's $1 million idea,
right? Or a $39 idea.
No, but you can mark it up 90% and sell the snot out of it.
That's right. It's an HDMI routing security appliance.
No. It's a hardwired IoT security appliance.
That's right. Yeah, because you could put that on your X-ray machine.
And this is why geeks suck at marketing.
Yeah. Normally, we're pretty good at marketing. We're just, this is our third bottle of wine.
Yeah. But don't worry, we could find a way to make money out of it.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure we could.
Totally.
There's a reason I'm not in marketing.
Facebook could be fined up to $5 billion over privacy violations. What I found interesting about this article is the article states, to be clear, the amount of the fine is not what the FTC has announced or hinted at. Instead, it's an estimated due that Facebook disclosed on Wednesday. I think that was yesterday. I think this article was recent, in the first quarter 2019 financial earnings report.
Yeah, and I think what they did is if I remember that article correctly, they've already put $3 billion aside
to pay the fines.
Just to pay the FTC fine. And this is on top of that, I think.
Interesting.
Yep.
Because they were putting money aside.
Even for Facebook, though, Matt.
$3 billion aside just for the FTC
that's
fine.
That's not chump change. To Facebook, that's not chump change.
No, it's not chump change. Yeah. That's a lot of money.
The article that I read on this suffered from poor editing, and it was at a well-respected, that the article said $5 billion, and then the subheading was 5 million, and in the article it said 3 billion. Like,
Jesus.
Which one is it?
Yeah, I know they set aside $3 billion to be prepared for what they believe will be their FTC fine. Oof. And if this story is $5 billion, not including that fine, we're now talking $8 billion in fines and potential damages that have to be paid out for privacy violations.
And we got two choices. Either we could pay off a tiny, tiny fraction of the national debt, or we could build a fucking wall. Just saying.
All right.
Wow. All right.
You went there. Not dragging politics into this.
You went there.
Sorry, couldn't help it.
Can we build a wall around Facebook? Because
I like that idea.
Well, I think China did. It's called the Great Firewall.
Yeah.
See how well that works.
What I find interesting, though, as all these Facebook things unfold, I think what's hurting Facebook's revenue potentially is the way it's treating advertisers. And so my personal experiences are with the Stogie Geek show. Had a great presence on Facebook. It was growing. And the minute you go to take out an ad, Facebook's like, yeah,
You're tobacco.
you're associated with tobacco. So our policy is, even though you're not selling tobacco, you're just doing a podcast about tobacco, that you can't take out ads. So I pick up all my toys and I go home on the Stogie Geeks podcast. With Security Weekly, we were distributing a bunch of stuff automatically into Facebook, and two things happened. One, they changed their API. For I don't understand the reasons behind why all these APIs have to constantly change all the time, and there's no backwards compatibility, and they just seem to be changing things for the sake of changing things, just like Linux distributions do. But the other thing that happened was our videos, even if we took out ads, were just getting squashed. That automatic ability. So before they changed the API, I noticed a point where all of a sudden our stuff was just going down into the toilet in terms of impressions. Because after the whole political debacle, is my guess, they changed how all their algorithms worked. It just making it super difficult to really be effective at marketing on Facebook, or at least set the bar high enough where you just went and found other avenues to advertise.
And the challenge for them is that's their revenue model.
Yeah.
That's where they make their money, because
their policies and in terms of content, and their policies in terms of how they treat ads have drastically changed. And I think a lot of people picked up the toys, went home and said, I'm just going to take out an ad on Reddit. That's whatever, or I'm going to do LinkedIn or Twitter, or I'm going to go somewhere else.
Right. And then you have an $8 billion fine
on top
with,
of all that.
with all that. Yeah.
Then the drama where people are leaving Facebook.
Yeah.
It's not looking good for.
It hasn't been a good 2019 for Facebook.
No.
It's not looking good.
No.
And it's not over yet.
This is true. It's not over yet.
Wait, there's more.
Yes.
What are they going to do next?
Yeah.
We're going to move to the next story.
So, Larry, this story is just for you, my friend.
Yeah.
A hacker could locate thousands of cars and kill their engines. Lorenzo Franceschi Lorenzo is a hacker who claims he managed to break into accounts belonging to users of GPS tracker apps, allowing him to monitor the locations of tens of thousands of vehicles, even granting him the ability to turn off the engine as some of them are moving. I didn't dig into the article to get the tie-in to, I get GPS, Larry, you've talked about GPS and how you can basically hack into the protocols and figure out where stuff is. I don't know how that translates into turning off the engine.
Yeah, I don't understand either that.
Unless he hacked into the GPS and used it as a launch point to get to the other electronics on the car.
To get into the CAN bus. Did I use that term correctly, Larry? The CAN bus.
Hello, car bus.
Yep.
And then once he's there, he pretty much has full control of the car.
Well, and that's something we've speculated on the show, or talked about, actually, not even speculated, that depending on the car manufacturer, once it's kind of like those old hubs versus switches. Once you're on the hub, you can do whatever you want and access everything, right? There's no separation.
So I read the article, and just now, looking for that one spot, and he says the risk didn't stop at the data breach and the monitoring of vehicle locations. The hacker also claimed he would have been able to turn off the engine of some vehicles when traveling at slow speed, under 20 kilometers per hour. That's it.
That's it.
Okay, so obviously this is European-based. He's probably Italian, based on his name.
So the
a lot of vowels,
and the map that was provided is in Morocco.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I think the funniest line in the whole article is, it all boiled down to the same underlying code, which explains why they both suffer from the same catastrophic flaw of using a default password.
Of the password was?
Oh, it didn't say what it was.
Yes, it did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh, it did. It did.
The password to my luggage. Damn it.
That's it.
Man,
your luggage is no longer secure.
Oh, shit. How many times?
There goes the planet.
That makes me think my kids really need to watch Spaceballs now.
They haven't watched it already?
They are huge. Ironically enough, the one that is named after one of the Star Wars characters is, although that's not what I tell my wife, but he is the biggest Star Wars fan,
Nice.
and I think they would get a huge kick out of Spaceballs now.
So when my wife and I
Yes.
met, my wife had never seen Star Wars, but she had only seen Spaceballs.
That puts a whole different light on Star Wars.
Does. It does.
And that's why he married her.
Wasn't the only reason, but certainly didn't help. I certainly
She
didn't
decided to
hurt.
hang out with you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that.
I had a lot of really good stories too that we could
You
just
did.
plow through. This one I put not +1 but +1,000, and I really love it. It's titled "Ramblings of a
Yeah.
Recovering Academic on the So-Called Lack of Security
I
Talent."
really wanted to hear your opinion
and
on this.
I want to read this because
But I can relate to this.
I picked out these couple of sentences from the article that really just, and I'm assuming the author has an academic background, that he's a PhD in computer science, and is writing an article about the talent shortage, and just so succinctly captured. We share feelings on this subject, and his words are very eloquent, and I couldn't have replicated this. So he says, in reality, the false impression that available jobs are unattractive may be a symptom of miscommunication between candidates and employers, and misunderstandings about an academic researcher's skills and interests, which run deep in the industry. In turn, the ability to source candidates from academia may be leading to a perceived lack of senior talent in the field. I was like, you got to read that a couple
Nailed
of
it.
times and really digest it. And
Yeah.
once you do, you're like, yeah, you nailed it. In like 3 sentences, dude, like you nailed it.
We've talked about aspects on BSW about the interview process and in aspects of the hiring side, right? And there's definitely some gaps in the way we interview for some of this talent, the expectations of what somebody needs to be effective in this space. You know,
Yeah,
a lot
so
of HR departments are
take
like, well, you got to have a bachelor's of science degree.
Yeah, we've stated it, but not as succinctly and eloquently as the author did. The false impression that available jobs are unattractive may be a symptom of miscommunication between candidates and employers. That means the candidates are trying to build skills, and the employers are trying to hire and seek out those skills, but they're just not in sync
Right.
at all. And it's not a skills gap necessarily. It's a miscommunication, as he states it.
There was a humorous tweet that I saw the other day that, maybe a couple weeks ago, that reminded me of something like this. That what human resources department put in those job advertisements and so forth and so on, and it was along the lines of an HR department looking for 6 years of experience in Jira, the new reverse engineering disassembly program.
Right.
And the comment was, you may not realize it, but many people in your network may actually have 6 years of experience in it because they worked at the NSA and have been using it for 6 years.
Right.
So,
And that's a very small pool, which again
agreed,
goes to the miscommunication.
but
Because what you're looking for is someone who has the aptitude to do reverse engineering.
right.
And you should hire based on aptitude, not necessarily skill level.
Right.
Yeah, you're looking for a mindset.
Yes.
You're not looking for specific listed skills. You're looking for the way people approach a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, people should be looking at it from that perspective. And that paragraph was perfect, Paul. I think it absolutely.
And so the other sentence, misunderstandings about an academic researcher's skills and interests. In other words, you may have a master's or PhD in some discipline. Does that mean that there's only like 3 jobs that you can go do? That's not what
because
it's
you
saying.
can apply that
Knowledge
to
just-
other fields.
Sure.
Right.
Or the other one is you need a certain degree. Is the other
Yeah.
one that always just drives me nuts.
Yep.
Is everybody? Not everybody has to get a bachelor's of science degree in engineering
Yeah.
to be effective in our field necessarily.
Right. Yeah, someone
but
who has,
they eliminate candidates because they don't have the degree requirement.
yeah, someone may
Well,
have a PhD
I
in.
would
Go ahead, John.
just a comment on that. I would rephrase it to, you need to have a degree, not a certain degree, because I think a degree is useful, because it demonstrates that you are willing to hang in there and put up with a bunch of shit to get to the other end.
No, I
Right?
agree. The degree largely represents that you have the skill of perseverance, or the characteristic of perseverance to reach an end goal.
To
right?
work hard to reach an end goal.
Yes.
And that's laudable. But a certain degree, it's the same kind of thing as this PhD is talking about. You know, it's like, no, you have the aptitude to learn. That's all I really care about.
Aptitude and mindset. I look at my oldest son, right?
A long-term project.
And as security people, we most of us can pick this out, right? At a very young age. I'd be driving around with my oldest son, and it could be like the most boring situation. We're driving through a neighborhood, and there's just house after house. There's really not much to look at. It's kind of a boring situation. And he'll just turn to me and go, you know, Dad, a lot of these houses have garages, and there's a door on the side of the garage. It's like, I really hope people remember to lock those doors, because that could be a really like big security hole. Like, all right, that like you need to come up with some kind of field that applies that aptitude, because not everyone drives through a damn boring neighborhood and looks at the doors and goes, "That's a potential security."
Is that unlocked?
Is that unlocked, or is it not?
Wait, can I pick that lock?
Yeah, exactly.
On the converse,
man.
my roommate in college, he said to me, my dad was really smart, and when we'd go in rides in the car, I'd ask him like a question like, "Dad, how does TV work?" And he'd go on this like an hour-long conversation about how the minutia of television works, and the into the ether and all this type of stuff. And I find myself doing that.
Yep.
Like, we'll come back home from karate, and that's typically the philosophical time. And my daughter asks, like, "Hey, Daddy, how does this work?" And I go on the minutia details about how something works. Like, "Daddy, how does a car work?"
Oh, my son, my middle son did that, and I was with my nephew. And he was driving, which is bad because he has his learner's permit, and I was supposed to be helping him drive. But my middle son asked, he's like, "Dad, like why is it night and day?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is great. We can talk about planets and Earth's rotation, going on this like whole big long
and the tilt
thing.
that gives us our seasons,
right? Like the whole thing," and trying to make him understand. I look at my nephew, I'm like, "How is that?" Like in the meantime, he probably went through like 8 stop signs. I was like, "Oh crap! I'm supposed to be teaching you how to drive."
Right. Well, it's like my daughter. She's into cars now.
Mm-hmm.
She knows almost as much about cars now than I do today. Because she's asking me questions. I'm helping her through it, but she's doing stuff I never did at her age. Hell, I don't even know that I can do them now. And it just, when you set your mind to something and you're interested in the topic, you're going to figure it out, right? You're going to ask enough questions. You're going to look at enough YouTube videos. She's going to figure it out. There's a lot of people out there that have really good base skill sets, that have the base understanding, base knowledge
To go figure it out.
to go figure it out. And those are people that we should be bringing into our industry, because they will be good, because they'll be like, wait, something's not right. I'm going to go figure this out. And they're going to grow in their careers, and they're going to do something brilliant eventually.
You know, we say that in our, and I think we very carefully tried to craft our job description for the open developer. By the way, we're looking for a developer here in Rhode Island to work in the studio and office with us. And yeah, like our apps that support production are built in Python. But like if you tell me that you have programmed in C or Java or any other language, like you're gonna pick up Python.
Pick it up.
You're gonna pick up Python. What I'm looking for more is the willingness to learn a new language, to learn cloud and containers, and because that's where we're going in Python. But I'm looking for that aptitude, not like whether or not you know Python. Like that's seemingly irrelevant.
If you do, bonus. But
I'm a
but if you know a
language.
language, you can learn another language.
I'm a crappy
Oh,
programmer, and I figured it out to cobble us along. Imagine if we had a developer that actually was talented at writing software. You pick up Python, and by the way, they're not doing it in between recording shows and all this other meetings and all this other stuff,
yeah,
right?
right.
Like you're gonna be fine.
It's like when I hired Sean. He knew .NET,
Yeah.
and we were building in Java. He figured it out.
He figured it
and
out.
he figured
Yeah,
out really
'cause
damn
Sean has
fast.
that-
And now he's one of the best, brilliant
Cloud
Java
engineer.
cloud
Yeah,
minds that I
yeah.
know, right?
Right.
And I bring him up often because
He has
didn't
no
finish-
degree.
He has no degree. He didn't finish school because he got busy programming originally in .NET into Java, and now he's been doing all this stuff. I mean, people who understand how to code are going to figure these things out, and they're going to evolve as the technology evolves, and they will pick it up super fast.
I think just like security is more of a mindset than anything else, software development and software engineering is a mindset.
Yes.
It really is.
And to the degree thing, I think if you have the right mindset, the degree or lack thereof is irrelevant. So, for example, my former intern, who we've hired full-time, graduated high school and was like, I don't really want to go to college.
Yeah, like
and,
why?
And I interviewed her and I was like, I'm hire you now, because she had this mindset of, there's a problem I want to solve. I'm going to learn about everything that I can to solve this problem and solve the problem. And the problem was that she wanted to play 2048, the game of matching tiles. She wanted to play that, but they weren't allowed to have phones at school. So she wrote it on her TI calculator and had to learn TI assembly to do it.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm going to hire you. Yeah, I'm going to hire you.
You start tomorrow.
I'll give you the inverse. I have 2 degrees. I don't use either one.
Right.
I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering, a master's in computer engineering. I haven't done anything on the double E side for 20 plus years. And I mean, where do I use my Comp E degree? I don't code anymore. I mean, yeah, I can figure out a Google function, but I haven't coded since I graduated in 96 to age myself.
I have a degree in business. I took some classes in marketing, and like I wish I had paid attention. So when I had to learn marketing, I would talk to people who were really good at marketing, and I would like take roles in marketing and figure it out, and that's how I learned it. So.
It reminds me of the story that I tell in the wireless class about Josh. Was that we had tried to get Josh on the podcast for many moons on a Thursday night, and he couldn't come on the podcast. And we asked him, Josh, like, you haven't been able to come on the podcast for like 2 years, or at least a year. And he said, yeah, I'm at the university auditing a couple courses. Like, what? Like, oh yeah, I'm auditing calculus and trigonometry.
Yeah, he took calculus and trigonometry.
I'm like, who the hell does that?
And he audited the class, which means he doesn't get credit for it.
Yeah.
He's there just to learn because he doesn't care about the credits towards the degree. He just wants to learn.
Yep. And you know why? Because he had forgotten all of it when he went to college, and he wanted to put this little speedometer thing in his code so that he could map Wi-Fi signal strength to an ellipse. And I'm like,
it was to apply it to his Wi-Fi and security engineering. Yeah, he had a problem.
Yeah.
As Joe McRae told me, he was taking classes in database administration. He had no intention of building databases or applications or being a DBA. He's like, I wanted to learn how it worked so I could learn better how to break it. And Joe, to this day, is one of the most talented people in SQL. I mean, that dude can like look at applications, and if he gets a SQL command working, like make it work on the fly from off the top of his head. And he's like, dude, I took database classes. Like that's the kind of person that you're.
I did too. I don't remember a darn lick.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I took database classes that they were IDMSR, not terribly applicable these days.
Chalk that up to
it was in Fortran, so it was cool.
Speaking of Oracle, there is an unpatched 0-day flaw in Oracle. Deserialization, remote code execution vulnerability.
Which will patch next quarter on their quarterly patch cycle.
Right.
No, but what was interesting is they called this highly critical. Now, I've seen critical vulnerabilities. I've seen high vulnerabilities. I don't think I remember many being highly critical.
In today's day and age, when you can remotely execute arbitrary commands using a specially crafted HTTP request without any authorization, could be why it was highly critical.
To the showdown!
Because
if you can execute arbitrary commands on the server without authorization, you may be running WordPress.
20 years ago, it was very difficult to find and map the entire internet. Now there's like so many people that have an entire database and are doing that kind of thing.
They're doing it constantly.
Where if you have an unauthenticated, remotely executable exploit that you can fingerprint the internet, it's bad.
And guess what? Oracle WebLogic sit in front of your Oracle CRM.
Yeah, like big CRM,
your ERP,
important
all this
systems,
stuff, right? I mean, it's sitting in front of all the Oracle
really
systems.
important Oracle stuff, whatever it is.
Whatever it is, with a lot of highly sensitive data, I'm sure, in it, and that's sitting there and
critical to your business operations.
yeah.
But my business doesn't matter. Nobody wants that data.
Yes, we do.
Yours we want, Lee. Nobody else.
Man.
I don't care about your data, Lee, but I'm just going to encrypt it and then ask for a ransom.
Yep.
If your data doesn't really matter to me.
All righty.
Right?
That's it.
I couldn't tell this article, story number 9, bootleg streaming devices. I wasn't sure, like they were very non-specific about the platform.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if it was basically just trying to say Kodi without saying Kodi.
I think it's Kodi or devices that are pre-installed coming from China running Kodi already.
Yep.
Type of thing.
That would be my guess. I don't know any other streaming device platform or app that's ubiquitous like Kodi that has add-ons that largely go unchecked, which should kind of, I think, start to curb people's usage because there's been a lot of exploits on that. Basically preying on, I don't know if it's a problem or a need or a combination of both, that I want to be able to consume content, and I don't even know that I don't want to pay for it, right? I think that consumers are willing to pay for content. The problem today is I don't want to pay 8 different providers for content. I don't want to pay Amazon for content because they have stuff that's only on Amazon, and then I have to pay Netflix, and then I have to pay Hulu, and now if you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to want to pay Disney because The Mandalorian is only going to be streamed on their new platform. I mean, that one I may actually pay for because I really want to see The Mandalorian, right? My other alternative is I choose 1 or 2 services that I do want to pay for,
Right.
and then I pirate the rest because I don't want to pay for 6 streaming services at $10 or $8 a month or whatever it is. I mean, I want to ditch cable, but if my cable's, $60 or $80 a month, and I'm paying $10 to $15 a month to all these 6 different services, then my cost is like the same now. And as a consumer, I think it really sucks.
Yeah,
The
I mean, if you want to
problem
cut the cable, you can't offset that with 8, 10 different services to replace cable at the same price. I mean, we haven't had cable.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I haven't had cable in probably over 5 years. We're Amazon Prime and Netflix.
Yep.
And we just switch back and forth depending on what show we're watching. And I call it good. I don't get live TV anymore. And aside of HD antenna, but
we're basic cable with a system that lets me distribute it over the network. So I have one cable device that I can stream to 4 TVs from basic cable, very low cost.
yeah, because they charge you for extra.
They
every
charge
extra
you for
job.
everything,
Like,
and then I
nuts.
supplement that with Amazon and Hulu. And then the kids will ask why don't we have Netflix? I'm like, we pay for cable, we pay for Amazon, and we pay for Hulu. Like, that's it. Like, I'm not. How many other streaming services do we have to subscribe to? Like, it reaches.
Dad, it's
everyone's
only
limit,
$10 a month more. Come on.
right?
Yeah,
So,
but if
Right?
somebody took all those and aggregated them and then gave me a service, even if it was $30-$40 a month, it'd be well worth it.
Or if it was $10 a month, and then I want to watch The Mandalorian from Disney. Well, that's like a $2 a month upcharge, or I pay $30 and I get
Right.
each $30 per season.
I can watch that series $2 for the month, and I retain them for 90 days.
Exactly.
So I can catch up.
Exactly.
So
I want to watch what I want to watch across all the.
we're a little bit different. We pay out the ass for cable because we have DVRs in 3 rooms, and
Sure.
but we do that and we record tons of content, and we also have
Then you stream it back out to other people who pay you a subscription for it.
No,
Oh, I like that. I like that.
because it's the the proprietary cable box, and I'm just not hands off.
That's highly illegal, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Sling box type thing. But we also have Prime and Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Netflix was out of other need from years ago, and the Prime is because of the free shipping from Amazon.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
I agree. Prime
So-
is kind of like
So we use those, and I keep those, and I use those video services because I'm finding that when I travel, I watch so much on those services that I
Yep.
can download and do those contents on
Mhm.
airplanes and hotels and you name it. That I've
on
actually
that.
started traveling with a Roku in
Yep.
my bag that I plug into the hotel TV and
There
try
you
to
go.
make work. But I've actually considered subscribing for YouTube Red, the one without ads.
YouTube's Red's another one. Yep.
Because I'm finding that I'm watching so much content on YouTube that getting rid of those ads is also huge.
Now, some of the hotels actually allow you to log into Netflix and Prime and other things now.
The problem is how you log out and wipe your account
Yeah,
out.
you gotta remember to log out. But at least it gives you the ability in the hotel room if you want to watch from your Netflix. You don't have to carry your Roku.
Right.
They'll actually give you an ability to log into it right at the TV.
What hotels are you
stream
staying
it.
at?
I'm Marriott's.
Okay, I'm a Hilton, and they don't have that.
That's why.
Yeah, the Marriotts do it. Like,
Now,
I'm the same way.
If you're going to pirate the content, you could face fines, which was covered in this article. And the other thing is, and I think they're referring to apps on Kodi, this one called Mobdro, forwards the Wi-Fi network name and password to servers in Indonesia. Other apps collect data on the user, including photos and videos on the network, and upload them to a server. In one case, an app collected more than a terabyte of data after getting connected to the network. Of course, we know what these apps do. There's one called Free Netflix that uses stolen Netflix accounts. They would constantly rotate. So there's a lot of shady stuff going on.
A data, not a. You said a megabyte.
Did I
No,
say
he said
a
he said a terabyte.
I did
Did he say terabyte?
Yeah, he said
I thought I said terabyte. Yeah.
Terabyte.
Yep.
So
and that's kind of interesting in that, I think about that, and I think about my new TV that we got not too long ago with Hulu, YouTube, Netflix built into the TV.
Oh, yeah.
And
All the smart TVs
DLNA
have
server.
Yep.
And because I run Plex now at home to serve my media stream to DLNA, and that could be interesting.
there's some shady stuff happening on what they call bootleg streaming devices.
Well, I mean, it's a huge market now.
Yeah,
Of course.
because of all the things that we've outlined.
Yep.
So, Joff, this one's for you. How a Nigerian ISP accidentally hijacked the internet. My comment was BGP for the loss.
Right?
You would think that network engineers at this level would, like in BGP itself, could prevent these things from happening, but they still happen today, Joff. Why is that? Is that
Well, it surprises me, right? First of all, secure peering. I mean, you should trust your peers. You should be authenticating your peers. That stuff goes without doubt. But then you can certainly have a malicious peer, even if you trust them and you authenticate them, that can inject any route, right?
right? So someone makes it's an insider threat, right? It's not necessarily an external threat actor or someone who's malicious that says, I want to take down the internet or take down Google. It's someone that goes, oops, I fat-fingered an IP address or something. I made a mistake.
That malicious peer that you trust could just be an idiot.
Or some of them, I mean, we're human. We all make
They
mistakes.
could.
Yeah.
They could. Mistakes are made, right? And this is why a lot of people... So routing forwarding bases work on longest prefix match, right? So if you have a more specific prefix and you inject it into the global BGP table,
right,
you're going to win.
So, Joff, I'll let you continue because this next sentence is very applicable to what you just said. Ultimately, what that meant was that for around 74 minutes, most traffic destined for Google and Cloudflare services from around the world was routed through Russia into China and onto Main One, which is an ISP in Nigeria.
Yeah, yeah. So there's ways to there's ways to make that happen, right? I mean, let's say you have a /16. Let's say Google or whomever have a /16. Well, if you inject 4 /18s into the route table for covering that /16, guess what?
More
the routes
specific.
are coming to you.
Right.
They're more specific. They're longer prefix.
It's BGP is doing its job in getting you to the place you're trying to go faster, right? Essentially.
Well, that's exactly right. So a lot of ISPs sensibly will cut off prefixes up to a certain limit. There's a lot that will not accept prefixes that are longer than /24. They're just saying if you're more specific than that in IPv4, I'm just not accepting it.
Gotcha.
Which is a solid security mechanism. They'll also look at AS path length and all kinds of other things. So there's a lot of very common mechanisms, but it's still a trust model. That's the fundamental challenge. And I think to some extent, rightfully so. And I don't think with a distance vector routing protocol, I don't think you could make it any different than a trust model. But
right.
A combination of accidents and potential maliciousness can still happen in a trust model, right? So that's it in a nutshell.
What you did.
I love that.
I was going to say
Distance vector routing model. That's yes.
Well, as opposed to a link state routing model.
Right.
You know, there's Dijkstra's algorithm, which is link state. There's distance vector, which is only the next hop knows, is basically the short way of saying that. Whereas the link state routing protocol models,
Now, OSPF
everybody on the network knows.
Is OSPF a link state?
Yeah, OSPF is link state. It's
And
Dijkstra
RIP v1 and v2 are also link state.
No, RIP is a distance vector
RIP
protocol.
is distance. Okay. Oh, no, yeah, because the same thing can happen with RIP, because that happened when I was at the university.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. ISIS, and EIGRP.
Yep,
I'm trying to remember. I think EIGRP may be a distance vector as well.
Gotcha.
Somebody will correct me.
All fascinating stuff. We talk about, cloud and application security, app user data, right? It comforts me to know that there's still security being applied to traditional network protocols that run the internet and
they have to
get
because
your stuff
it's running
from point
the
A to
internet.
point B. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, I've actually consulted with customers on this before, and I've said, look, I've gone into networks, and I've sat there on the network on a user segment, and I've seen OSPF advertisements that are not authenticated, and I go grab the guys. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? I mean, straight up. I'm like, you are advertising route protocol on user segments first. No, don't do that. Second, they're unauthenticated, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, right?
My favorite is when they do that over the unencrypted open guest wireless network.
Right.
and people
Ask
do
me
that.
how
It's
I know
like,
this.
Because you've seen it.
And exploited it.
If again, this is a theme that we talked about earlier. It comes back to architecture and design. You've got to know your environment. You've got to architect it well, and you've got to not make these rookie mistakes. I mean, that's stuff that can be exploited so easily. And if you come in, you have some 2-bit vendor that does set and forget, you're going to get what you paid for. It's, and I'm sorry for you. But that's not the world you want to live in, right? You've got to authenticate your peers. You've got to advertise only across the links that are router to router, not on your user segments. And you've got to set the appropriate security controls in place on all those devices.
I think it's also a great point to mention that if you're doing failover type protocols, what is Cisco? VSRP is Cisco's?
VRRP or HSRP.
VRP or HSRP, right? And there's open source implementations of them. I could do some tech segments on some of the open source ones because I've implemented them here in the studio. But those fall in the same thing. Like basically, if you can inject yourself, right, you can become the default route for the entire segment potentially, or the route, or one of the routes for the segment, because you can basically just opt for an IP address in there, and if it's not authenticated, game over.
Same goes with spanning tree. If you advertise spanning tree protocol at a higher priority level, well, there's nothing to say that me as an end node on the network, if the switch is not secured properly, that I could not advertise spanning tree at a lower priority number, which essentially is higher priority, right? Lower digit, integer digit, and I become the path. And if I put an Ethernet cable between 2 ports on the same switch, and I advertise spanning tree like I am the preferred path at a lower bridging priority number, guess where the traffic goes?
Right.
It goes through me, right?
And this is one reason why you should not be running Telnet. Or anything unencrypted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So those kinds of first hop redundancy protocol exploits and spanning tree exploits at layer 2, these are classic examples of local broadcast segment things, same thing with like ARPcast poisoning and stuff that could get you into real big trouble. And there are plenty of ways to take advantage of.
I find it interesting that I don't think a lot of these are in use today as pen testers or attackers because it's relatively easy to escalate to domain admin in most environments. I think it's
we tend to focus on the hosts,
right? And if once those start getting more difficult, we could see a resurgence of these types of attacks on the network.
Well, I could have a whole new consulting career then,
right? What is old will be new again, Joff. That's one thing I think. Almost 14 years, doing this show.
My God.
We can bank on, right?
Yeah, this industry, it's
comes
happened.
full
it's
circle
over and over
all
and over
the time.
Again.
And I don't know if this is coming full circle, but certainly something that we've talked about. That this, my only comment to this was, finally, like it's about freaking time. and I think this is going to resonate with everyone here and our audience. So the latest draft for baseline configuration for Windows 10 version 1903 and Windows Server 1903 drops the tedious requirement of rotating passwords. So
finally,
basically,
oh my God, finally.
Microsoft is dropping the requirement for password expiration because they finally realized that it has no bearing on security, that people just use password 1, password 2, password 3. If you make it more
Arguably
complicated
makes
than
it
that,
worse.
it's password 1 exclamation point, right? It's not.
You encourage user sequencing behavior, which is a bad idea.
Yes.
Password bang at pound dollar.
Yeah, whatever they can do to get around it, because it's an inconvenience to the user, forcing them to just continue to choose poor passwords.
Correct.
And it's refreshing to see that Microsoft is implementing this.
Well, as long as if we get it away from the auditing community as well, you know, I hope that happens. It's like this 90-day rotation idea. Terrible idea. Terrible idea. Like, go long and strong. And
we've been saying this for 20 years, though.
Yeah.
20 years. We've been like, why are you forcing users to change their password? This is just a step backwards.
If it's long and strong,
It's down to get the
it's
friction
harder
on.
to break.
Right.
I was waiting for somebody.
You didn't have to wait that long. You didn't even finish the sentence.
It's nice having company down here in the gutter.
Why rotate it?
Fellas, his girlfriend got the butt.
That's what you wife.
Hell yeah!
Shake it. Shake that nasty butt.
Baby got it back.
I had a guy telling me
God
today
damn it, that
he
was my
wanted to have a
password. Now I gotta
6-character
change it.
generated password.
Gotta shake that damn password up now.
Oh,
Yeah, no twerking in public.
God damn it! Pick my password.
Oh, never mind.
right?
No twerking in public. Was that yours?
Yeah, add that to the dictionary.
And then he had an 01 on the end, and then an 02, and then an 03.
Right.
No, he had a 1 bang, a 2 at.
No twerking
and
in
then-
public yesterday. No twerking in public today. No twerking in public tomorrow. Next quarter. Next.
Oh man.
I think
I'm going to make it super secure. I'm putting the year on the end.
this
Yes.
this
Yeah,
wasn't
there you go.
this wasn't the most interesting story, but Crooks are using the GitHub platform to host phishing
This
sites.
is pretty cool.
I mean, we kind of knew this was going to happen, right? I mean,
Oh, of
this
course.
is. I think this is why there are so many ridiculous restrictions on so many services we have today, largely because since the beginning of computing and the internet, people have abused these services, right? It's why when I write API interfaces that there's so many quotas and limits because people abuse it, right?
Yep.
It's why we can't have nice things like
This is how we
host
dance.
web pages in GitHub because attackers are like, oh, I can host my phishing website in GitHub. This is
Wait,
great.
I'm feeling a little guilty right now as a pen tester.
Because you do this. Everyone yeah, exactly. This is
And Joff, to that, the amazing part for some of this is you start abusing the domain trust. Like, how many, web
because GitHub's in the Alexa top 1,000
and,
or whatever.
and how,
right? Yeah.
and how
Exactly.
many inspection services, desktop, you name it, trust GitHub.io because GitHub has that trust and that implied trust, and they don't necessarily check by subdomain.
What this
Right.
manifests to is some of my experiences this week where I'm trying to use the YouTube API, for example, and you're limited as the number of requests that you can make, and that differs per API from Google. Now, as Matt pointed out, YouTube was a Google acquisition. Their API is a friggin' hot mess. And when I was asking Joff before, and let me just put this PSA out there. I'll ask the question, have you ever used the YouTube API? If your answer is no, make sure it's always no. Like, don't ever go
Don't
there
even
because it's a
try it.
friggin' hot mess. And one of the reasons I believe it's a hot mess is because of situations like this. Because people have abused it, they have to put limitations and quotas inside of it. And what that means is I ran into some instances this week where I wanted to use the API, I ran out of requests, and they're like, oh, you can submit a form to apply to have an increased quota. And so when you start filling out the form, it's this extremely lengthy and painful.
It's like 5 pages of data.
It's like an NSA interrogation or like
what are you
polygraph
using the
test.
API for? What
Why are you
application
using
is
the
it? What are you doing with
Tell
it?
me about your application. What does it do? How many requests do you want to make? Why do you want to make those requests? If you couldn't make those requests, how would that impact your application? And I'm like, I just want to gouge my eyes out with a fork right now because it's
So
just
that was like
horrifying.
formerly filling out the AWS pen test permission form.
Yes.
How many
very
requests
similar.
do you think you're going to do? 500,000. Oh, that seems excessive. So you go and revise it to 5,000.
5
Okay, that
million.
looks good.
Right.
5 million.
And so, but I imagine that GitHub is now going to have some of these protections in there to prevent this from happening in the future because, again, it's why we can't have nice things.
I think some of us have been known to use sites like that for delivery of certain specimens in certain cases, and
Right.
can you blame us?
Job,
I mean, come
you are why we can't have nice things. Damn it.
Next thing, this article will be about Microsoft OneDrive.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Can
I
that
just say
host
that out
website?
loud?
Wait,
Did
can
I
that-
just say that out loud? Sorry.
Can that host files or websites or just files?
Files.
Just files, yeah.
Yeah. it's like
Which your
Google Drive.
GitHub.io website points to OneDrive.
Oh,
I mean,
interesting.
Jeff's
it does under
Jeff's
the-
taking notes.
It does under the
I
new
am.
merger acquisition
Yeah.
framework.
Yeah.
Yes. Great.
What's your shit at OneDrive? I mean,
Oh man.
Oh boy.
Don't do
No,
it.
I've got better ways. We can take that offline, Larry.
yes. Yeah, remind me let's talk over the next week or so.
Let's talk.
Let's talk about the black hole.
Yes.
It's always a good thing.
Yes.
And what about the black hole?
Oh,
No.
I was just
Which
throwing it out.
one?
I was
So this is Johnny's story.
This is
And-
my story.
And I
Johnny's
thought
story.
this was amazing that PhD scientist, came up with some methods for being able to render terabytes of data into a single image to actually give us the first image of what a black hole looks like.
Okay, but hold on. Let's name her so we're
Name.
just not talking about the woman. Dr. Katie Bowman?
Katie Bowman.
Katie Bowman.
Dr. Katie Bowman, 29-year-old computer scientist, created the algorithm that was able to capture the picture of the black hole.
Yes.
Katie
She's
created
awesome.
the algorithm,
Yes.
which is a computer science accomplishment in and of itself. Others implemented the code. I mean, everyone deserves kudos here.
Yeah.
And you can't take anything away from Katie, who developed the algorithm.
Right.
Like, that's awesome.
5
She's right.
petabytes
She's
of
right.
5
data.
petabytes
5
of
petabytes.
data.
So
crazy.
thousands of terabytes. I misspoke.
A metric ass fuck ton.
Yes.
Thank you, Joff.
And that is the actual imperial term, the imperial measurement, right? A metric fuck ton, right?
Metric ass fuck ton.
Yeah, an ass
That's
fuck
a
ton.
lot of data.
My apologies.
Yeah, don't forget you gotta have the nuances.
Because if it was not the imperial, it would be the. No, that's the metric. If it was the imperial, it would also be a ton, but it would have a different value for said
It's
ton.
a great article. Johnny was showing me this article. It talks about the next computer where Steve Jobs founded the operating system used a black hole as the trash can.
Yep.
which was
and
awesome, by the way.
There was like debates about like the people that wrote the code
Yeah.
were like trying to take credit or something.
No, other way around. Like the internet trolls
Mm-hmm.
bashed Katie for quote taking credit for this image.
She developed that algorithm.
But she
Yeah.
developed the algorithm that her team, which she gave credit to for the team,
Right.
converted that paper algorithm into
It's
actual
correct.
computer code.
Mm-hmm.
And trolls were giving her shit because her GitHub commits were significantly less than her male counterparts.
Just
No.
'cause trolls are trolls.
Like this is like in The Force Awakens where BB-8 has just a part of the map where Luke Skywalker
right.
is. R2-D2 has the other part of the map.
Yep.
This is totally that.
Yeah.
Like
You have to.
Katie had
Bring
the
it.
pieces of the map. The programmers had the other. It was a team. It was a team effort. Like in both sides.
Katie
were-
had the critical part for the map that
Right.
without the rest of the team's map was useless.
Yeah. It's just an outstanding effort
a
by
team
all.
effort.
Exactly, by all involved. And we see this, and we have all seen this countless times in our careers, right? There's people that are designing and people that are implementing, and you can't have one without the other, right? Like you need the people that design.
To build an algorithm, you have to figure out how to embed it into code. So Sean and I patented an algorithm on how to do risk calculations, but Sean had to implement it in code. In code. And when you think about what we were doing back then, this was 04, 05, the math was not easy to implement in code because the way we built the concept of the algorithm was an exponential equation where you could literally run the computer out of memory before you could finish calculating a result. So we had to modify aspects of how you actually calculated that on a computer because the theoretical algorithm would not fit in the memory footprint of a computer, right? And so
team effort.
It's a team effort. You come up with the concept for the algorithm going, this makes sense on how we should calculate risk. And that was the algorithm was about. But when you actually had to apply it into computer code, you had to realize what the limitations of the physical hardware would be to actually make it work. And it takes work to figure those two pieces out. You need the coders who understand, oh yeah, you're trying to do this to like the nth power, and like, dude, at some point, n gets so big.
We're going to run out of resources. Yeah.
And so Sean was really good at understanding how to take things and try to create things more linearly instead of exponentially in the way he had to code it.
What the internet trolls do not understand in their limited capacity is that this happens all the time, that there are people who create the algorithm and there are people who implement it in code, and they work together in teams all the time on very small scales. Our crappy little stats application, we've done that probably 10 times over, right?
At least.
Really, really smart people are doing this at a grand scale to do things like map a black hole for the first time. This is how technology works. It's not about who's taking credit for what. This is how computer science feats are accomplished, is working together in this capacity.
We don't have unlimited compute.
Yeah. Exactly.
And when you don't have unlimited compute, you have to make adjustments.
We don't have unlimited quotas on the YouTube API.
Right. We don't.
So therefore, we have to, right?
For everybody to know.
Related conversation I want to and ask our listeners as well, and Matt, if you have something in mind, to that of having somebody to take an idea and implement it. I have an idea. And right now, this is an honest question for our listeners and Matt, for you, from experience that's local. I have an idea, and I can describe ad infinitum the technical components that would go into implementing said idea. It has not been implemented, but I need someone to translate
that idea into
a patent. If you know somebody that can do that, or if our audience knows someone that can do that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, there's really good patent lawyers
out
out there that. Wow, man! Holy cow!
Do
you have a straw over there?
I'm thirsty.
That's our last bottle.
It is. This is bottle number 3.
When we did the patent for Control Path at the time,
I've done one.
Sean and I had done a lot of the work, right? But we had to go hire a really good patent lawyer because the patent lawyer knows how to construct the patent application to really figure out how to get that idea patentable.
Yep.
And not all patents have to be actually, they can be more process and oriented versus actually implementable. In our case, we had both pieces by the time we did it. And that's what a patent lawyer is really, really good at. But it takes also sometimes somebody like a Sean Malloy's brain to wrap his head around the idea to say this is how you would implement, because when you have the idea and the implementation scheme, those patents typically get they're more likely to get approved because it's not only the theory but it's also the implementation of how you do it.
So it's interesting. Dave Kenny and I have this conversation all the time because we'll talk about how we design things and try and communicate those requirements. And oftentimes Dave and I, we have a technical background, so we can write code, albeit we both admit we're not like software engineers, but we can write code well enough so that it sort of works, and then give it to an engineer that can really go take it and make it into an actual software product.
Same.
And what Dave and I both experience, I don't know if we said this on air or off air, was that we'll have an idea, we'll communicate it to developers, we'll say, look, I'll write you a prototype, and then we'll write something that's pretty close to what we, somewhat close to what we kind of envisioned, and we'll give it to them, and they're like, oh, when you explained it to me, I didn't know that you meant this, that, and the other thing. And we're like, yeah, because that my brain just kind of translated that into code, into a prototype, and then actual software developers go and take that to the next level. And that's a really great way to go from concept or idea to actually working product. Is you're prototyping it and then giving it to the people that implement. And this is kind of like a similar thing, right? Like an algorithm to code is not. It's part art and part science, all kind of blended together.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that's where I'm at, is that I can describe the types of data, how I'd acquire it, how I'd store it, how I'd process it, the methods in which I'd process it, which I think are fairly unique, the capture methods, the reason why we would do this are fairly unique.
Yep.
Or very unique.
What actual software developers do is I can do that better.
And that's great.
And that's fine. That's what you want.
But my problem is that I need someone to translate what's in my head to that patent application, so that developer that wants to implement it better has to license it from me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like our stats engine code that I've been working on, right? I want to turn that over to someone like Joff, who's a real developer, and go this is what I meant when I explained it to you, and Joff can go through the code and go, oh yeah, I get that, and by the way, those 16 lines of code I can do in one line of code, right? Kind of
16, 300.
Probably more like 300, right?
Yeah.
My Python regular expressions could
but
do some
what
cleaning up.
I've experienced with patent applications, because we did a number of them at Layered Insight. I managed the portfolio at Tenable for the IP, and have done one myself, is the theory to implementation. When those two come together in a patent application, they become really good bodies of work for patent approvals.
Right.
And you need aspects of the implementation to take the theory into that actual design and implementation. And so sometimes if it's just the theory, and there are companies that just patent the theory and the algorithm.
Yep.
IBM and others have been notorious for this over the years.
But they have teams
and
of
they
hundreds
have teams
of patents
doing
of lawyers.
research and coming up with new algorithms and this, that, and the other thing that they're patenting, but there's no implementations of them. But the ones that hold up the best are when you have both of those.
The implementation, agreed.
Agreed. And I think I'm at a point where I have this idea that I can implement it, that I just need to have the time and the scale and the resources to make it happen. It's all pipe dream.
I'll sound a quick cautionary note. Having gone through the process, be very, very careful that you don't let it take on a life of its own and have the patent attorney folks put words in your mouth, because you can get into a situation where they're trying to put flesh on the bones just so that they can get paid. And you have to be a little bit careful when you're going through the process to make sure your idea is fully fleshed out, all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed, every possible question that you can imagine that will come up from an intellectual original proof of work perspective is answered. That's the kind of thing that you go through.
I wanted to transition to Johnny's other story as a virtual reality treatment for ADHD or ADD, right? I've heard of it. It's funny that we're talking about algorithms and patents and implementations. I've heard of at least 2 different non-pharmaceutical treatments for ADD or ADHD. This one uses virtual reality. Another one uses some kind of patch or something you put on the front of your head to help treat this particular symptom. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So Joff and I both have autistic children, We did attempt medication at one time for Kyle. Not successfully, by the way. Some of these psychotropic drugs I think are pretty dangerous potentially to kids.
Agreed.
And you see a lot of kids with autism, ADD, ADHD going out and doing cocaine derivatives, and we don't know the impacts of their brains. And so if
Totally
you can find
there's a lot of substance abuse.
a lot,
in
just a
both
ton.
those,
And I mean, look, my wife's an RN, and we went through some treatments, and we didn't really see an improvement, and we're like, we're done, right? Because why mess with the brain in that way from a pharmaceutical perspective? Joff, I'm sure you have similar experiences.
Absolutely.
If there are ways to use non-therapeutic methods, and if virtual reality is a way, and I think it's an interesting article because I know how engaged my son is with the kind of the video. He does the group chat stuff with his friends. And it is something that I think it helps him because it helps him focus. He's with his friends. They're doing the group chats. And if virtual reality can instill aspects of that to treat aspects of what these kids have, I think this is a great idea because drugs are really scary about what they're going to do to these kids' brains, especially at their age. I mean, my son's 17. I mean, I think he was on Ritalin when he was he was probably 10, 11.
Yep, mine too.
Right?
Yep.
And that's the first place the docs will send you, right? They're like, oh, try Ritalin or some of these other derivatives.
But by the way, Matt, I got to ask you, did you ever actually take one of the pills yourself to see what it does to you?
No.
God damn it, I did.
No, I didn't.
I sure as shit did.
Those
and
red pills were crazy.
That stuff is no shit. I mean, it's speed. I was up for 20 hours.
It is, and the thing is, they don't really realize like what they're giving because it's so potent to even like me, and I'm 26, and we're older, and they're 10, 11 years old, and they don't really know what it's going to do to them.
Yeah,
and they're giving
it's their go-to though.
Speed.
It's just their go-to because that's what they're told by the
Yep. Yeah,
it's the go to the freezer, get the box.
Yeah, it is, and it's really scary to think about. What is it doing to these kids? And it's scary a lot. And as a parent, you're like, if I'm not seeing that much of improvement, why am I doing this to my kid?
Exactly.
Right. And so then you look for alternatives. And if this is an alternative that allows them to deal with some of these issues without medicating, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Because
I like the technology aspect, non-pharmaceutical, to treat these various issues with kids or adults.
Not having the issues currently, is it less of a treatment as more of a ability for them to cope and manage with the deck they've been dealt?
So, I mean, that's the thought process behind it, but I don't know that it does. I'm not sure to Joff's point, I didn't take a pill, so I don't know what the impact for me as an adult would have been, but I can't imagine what that does to an adolescent.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the
change.
scariest part. And parents will just be like, okay, I'm putting my kid on Ritalin. Yeah. I'm like, do you know what that's going to do? I don't know that helps
my question is that I'm going to put my kid on Ritalin. Fuck, you're giving them speed and that, but I'm going to put my kid in VR. Is the speed a drug mechanism to be able for them to deal with the situation and be able to be more uncomfortable in certain environments and be able to focus more? Or is the virtual reality the same thing in which they're in situations where they can now build mechanisms in which they can cope so that when they're not in VR, they don't have to take VR to be in a social situation where it would help?
I mean, hopefully that is what this research is trying to identify.
It kind of comes full circle to the interview we did with Mandy, who's keynoting RVASec in Richmond, Virginia. Jake Koons, it's an awesome individual I've known forever. I got a chance to meet our families collectively met in Disney World, and I met his family in some of the boat rides between the various things.
Nice.
And him and his dad wrote a children's book that my kids, Jake, absolutely love by the way. My oldest son is reading it to the younger ones, and it's all about how, families and dads and kids and moms deal with technology. And he wrote it with his dad, which is really cool. But man, he was looking for someone. Unfortunately, he wanted me to keynote, but I couldn't because it overlaps with my son's birthday. But he was looking for someone different to keynote, and I said, "Look, the interview that I've done that really sticks out, dude, is with Mandy, who basically hacked her brain and her body back to health, and that's similar to what we're talking about right now. And she's keynoting RVASec, and I was just so happy to see that all pan out.
I think
it's a great topic for us to talk about as hackers, right?
Because I think in my son's specific case, his autism is more related to, I think, brain damage from his open heart surgery when he was 3 months old. Mm-hmm. And the brain needs to reconnect pathways.
Yes. That's what Mandy talks about. Have you listened to that?
No, I haven't, but I know her story because we've talked to her.
That's exactly what she talks about,
and it's about reconnecting pathways. Mm-hmm. Drugs, I don't think, are the things you want to figure out how to reconnect the brain pathways.
They treat symptoms. They don't reconnect pathways.
Right. What I think is important for children that have autism, children that are ADD or ADHD, it's about creating the synapses in the brain and allowing the brain to create those new pathways to manage the situations. And if VR or any of these technologies are a way to facilitate that
without just treating the symptom, right?
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Is way healthier than just drugging your kids.
Because let's be honest, just pharmaceuticals really just treat symptoms.
Yes.
I mean, just make one more comment on Matt's dead on. Having watched my child for 20 plus years, the thing that a virtual reality environment gives them, and he's a big gamer for really the same reasons, is it gives them a sense of control over their environment and to take in that environment at a certain sequenced level, at a certain sequenced speed. One of the big issues with autistic kids is they cannot process the parallel signals from the external world at the same pace as the rest of us. Right. And so they get overwhelmed really quickly. Yeah. So to put them in an environment where it's a controlled environment allows them to do it on their terms, which makes an enormous difference to the way they're able to interact with that world.
Yeah, it's sensory processing.
Is that why you see autistic children? Is it autistic children that wear headphones?
Yes.
To help kind of
cut out the additional sensory, because it's a sensory processing issue. And so when you, some kids are better with, and Kyle doesn't need this, but there are kids in his class, for example, that wear the headphones, and that is to cut out all the external sensory inputs that they can't process effectively. And so the headphones help them deal with that. If VR gives them that same sense of sensory processing because it's in a controlled environment, it would help them kind of, like I said, reconnect some of those synapses to be able to
relearn. And potentially over time, adding more and more stimulus to build more synapses.
Yes. Right. So as Larry said, when they're not in the virtual reality world, they've retrained their brain, made those connections to have.
And hopefully they can cope better with all the external sensory inputs that they're dealing with.
Yes.
And going on top of that, in the article it states, it's ironic that technology is being tested to remediate distraction, given that screens are one of the primary drivers of distraction in the world today. Yeah. But virtual reality has the benefit of offering immersive environments, those in which distractions can be precisely controlled and amplified or decreased during exposure therapies, which makes total sense.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly.
So, this was a marathon episode. I want to thank everyone for being on the show. Another marathon episode. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. Larry, take us out.
Over and virtual reality.
Out.